Welcome to the next part. We will be adding more details to the pumpkin and colors to the stem and the pumpkin in this part. So let's first create a network box for this stem, and let's call this create stem. I'm gonna color it in green, and I'm going to save the file. Save as, create the stem. Okay, save. And the pumpkin details workflow is going to be actually very similar. What I want to do is, let's preview the wireframe. I want to subdivide it one more time so we have extra room, extra polygons for the noise. And also you can see that the UVs are not there anymore, but it's not a big problem. We can recreate them very easily, and we also needed to map the interior pieces better. So let's go ahead and do that. So first I'm going to add a subdivide. So we're going to subdivide it one more time. Then let's add a UV texture. Okay, UV texture, and let's turn off the wireframe. Yeah, in the subdivide, it will generate this topology that I don't really like. I want to keep everything in triangles, so I'm going to use open subdiv loop. So it should give us triangles, and then let's turn off the wireframe. So subdivide would also smooth out some of the details and make them look nicer. So let's connect this to the UV texture. We're going to set this again to be polar UVs, and we want them to be generated on the point. Okay, so we have the UVs now. We can add these extra displacement details in the shader. However, I'm just going to go ahead and do it in SOPs and then drive the color from them. Let's add a mountain SOP. So I'm going to use the mountain, which will again destroy our shape completely. Let's turn off the UVs in the viewport. So we will need to be very careful now, because we have a lot of areas that are quite sharp and tight together. And if we look at the normals here, we would see that there are a lot of normals that are just pinched and intersecting, and we can work with this, but the mountain would just go a bit crazy, and it will give us a lot of intersecting polygons. So what we can do to make the mountain's life easier is we can blur the normals before plugging them into the mountain for the actual normal displacement. So I'm going to use attribute blur. So we are going to blur the normals, not the position. So in the attributes where it says P, instead of P, let's shift N to use the normals. And I'm going to use the size of 100. We want to blur them like that. Okay. Let me see. So actually, before that, we need to make sure that there are point normals. So let's add a normal node. Because yeah, without it, we wouldn't be able to do it. So now we're going to set it, compute normals. We're going to set it to points. So now you can see after we blur them, they are going to look like this. So this is what mountain is going to see before the displacement. But don't worry, it will look all nice and sharp after the mountain. But already this is going to look much better once we adjust the strength. So the overall amplitude is going to be, again, very small, 0.02, actually went with 225, okay. So it's barely visible here, but first of all, we are still displacing by the position as a location attribute. Let's use UVs instead. And then once we go to the element size, and once we make this much smaller, something like 0.1, we start seeing something more interesting. However, we need to stretch out the y-axis noise. So I'm going to click on XYZ here. And this is a pretty common operation. So 3.5 is going to be the stretching value, but feel free to stretch it more. All right, so we got something more interesting, but the actual noise that I have used in this final image to get all these little details on the surface was again the cellular noise. So if I change the noise type to Worley cellular, it will basically do something like that, but we want to adjust it further. Actually, there is one more thing. Yeah, we can also adjust the size of these noise elements by adjusting the UVs. So if I set the UV scale to 2, we would get thinner cuts like that. And don't forget, the cellular would do the inverted cells. We want them actually to bulge outward. So we can enable the remap ramp, and then in the actual ramp we can click on reverse domain. So now we would have something more similar to what I had originally. The other thing about the cellular noise, it will give you very smooth cuts and details, but if you change the fractal type from hybrid terrain to standard FBM, you would get much more high frequency details like this. So this is basically what I used for the final pumpkin, and you can see these look much more interesting. So you can play with the offset in the noise. You can play with the UV texture offset. For example, I think I used offset of 25 here, which gave me, yeah, so this kind of more bulging on the top. So something like that would give your pumpkin a bit more character and make it look more interesting. So now you can see the top actually looks really nice as well. It looks like this is a horror pumpkin, and it's been through hundreds of years, hundreds of Halloweens. So now we can use this pumpkin instead of the clean one for the ray and the mask from geometry. So I'm just going to select the second outputs from ray and mask from geometry, and I'm going to connect them to this output instead. So our stem would be actually rayed onto this distorted geometry. So let's check it out. I'm going to hold Control Shift and click on the template to see the stem. Okay, so this is now mapped correctly. And again, if you feel that this is too thin, you can go to the mask from geometry node, and then we can maybe add this, make this a bit thicker like that. The other thing you can do, actually, you can add the subdivide right after the sweep, which I think we actually did here. Interesting. So this is, oh, I probably should have added the depth of 2 here, and then we can remove this subdivide. Actually, we don't need this one. Yeah, so something more like that. Okay, so we got this and we got the pumpkin. Now let's see how we can add the colors. And this part we can just say add extra detail. So let's do details, extra details. Okay. So I will show you how to do the color for both the pumpkin and the stem in the next part.